So what's your podcast about?
Superheroes.
It's a little geeky, but I think you guys are gonna like it.
Try not to be too geeky.
No, I can't promise that.
Should we begin?
It's a bird. It's a plane. It's the Geek and You Shall Find podcast. And now, your hosts, Kelsey Dickerson, Brad Fay, Kate Fay, and Noah Berlin.
Hold on to your butts.
All right, welcome everybody to a special bonus episode of the Geek and You Shall Find podcast powered by Superhero Faces. We've got Brad, Kate, Kelsey, and I am Noah here to talk all about season 2 of House of the Dragon. We are talking about it as a whole, not each individual episode. We already did episodes for that, breakdowns, recaps, that kind of thing. So if you want to check those out, please go on the Geek and You Shall Find channel on YouTube or on podcasting platforms. You can check out every episode from both seasons 1 and 2 and hear our thoughts and our jokes about all those episodes. But like I said, we're going to recap, talk about the positives of the season, talk about the negatives of the season, and we're going to give out our season-long awards. So, guys, the first question I have for you is, what do you think, what was the climax to the season in your mind?
Gotta be the battle, right? Rook's Rest. For me.
I mean, that was early. I feel the same way, but that was episode 4.
Yeah,
No.
I thought it was when Rhaenyra got all those dragons. Like that was the climax for me. And like we talked about in previous episodes, like I would have been actually probably happier with that being like the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that that's what they ended up like pivoting to make it be, but it just like, yeah, I mean,
Damn.
what the thing that's crazy is we broke this all down in the last episode of the podcast for the finale, and we talked about how we would rank this as a standalone episode, but then how we would rank it considering, you know, this is the capstone of the whole season. This is the finale. And I had arguments with Travis, who was on this podcast last season, and some other friends who they really gave a lot of hate on the episode. Like you, Brad, you gave that episode a 3 out of 10. Travis gave it a 4.5 out of 10. Like everyone was way lower. So first thing I'll do is I will amend mine. I said I loved the episode. I said it was an 8, but that's because doing this podcast, I have to try to keep it like compartmentalize it all, right? I got to say, like, just the episode. I'm just thinking about this as an episode, and I did like the episode, but you really can't avoid the fact that it is the finale, right? It was. So it definitely should have been much lower than that. I concede that for you, but rumors came out a couple days after the finale aired, talking about that the whole season was written, months and months of work. The season was written, and I want to say March of 2023. Then right after that, or like a month before filming, HBO came to the writers, to the showrunners, everyone, and said, hey, you guys are going to need to cut 2 episodes off of this. So instead of going 10 episodes that they prepared for, they wrote 10 episodes. All of a sudden they had to cut 8, or cut it into 8. And at that point, the writer's strike was on, and so they couldn't reorganize everything. They couldn't rewrite it all to tell a more cohesive story over 8 episodes. And so what we got is what we got. And so when we were talking about the fact that episode 8, the finale, did not seem like a finale, and that little montage at the end, that was the only thing that really seemed like a finale, that's because it was not supposed to be a finale, and they added that montage there so it could be more of a conclusion to it, which I thought was pretty crazy.
I'm so sick of HBO doing that. That's exactly what screwed up Game of Thrones the last 2 seasons. Like them like shortening episodes and like doing all that crazy stuff. In addition to obviously like the books not being done and like, you know, not really having like that direction. But like why was there ever reasoning for that of like why they went that direction?
You think that was really, it was just cost cutting? You don't think it had anything, did it say anything about like shooting schedule? Because like I could see if it's like, hey, like Matt Smith is shooting this movie next year, the strike got us pushed back, and now we're gonna run with that. We've got to, you know, we only have X amount of time. Like I wonder if
they
like
said straight up, because it's Warner Universal, I want to say, is like now the parent company of HBO. That's why they changed it to Max from
Yeah.
just HBO app. Like all these dumbass decisions. I just think it's all in the name of cutting costs with the new parent company, and that was what they said it was for, which just sucks because you're right, Kelsey, and like to me, as a fan, we're watching Game of Thrones. Every season has 10 episodes, and they're all, for the most part, pretty great. Once they started tweaking this and either like changing the pacing or the just changing the storytelling, like it fucks with it. And so I don't know why they would continue to do this when a show is popular. Like,
Yeah, and I mean, we'll
And
get
they
to
have
it a
so
little
much
bit.
money. Like they don't need to cut costs. Like I pay you a lot of money, and so do a lot of other people. So I know they have money.
yeah, I'm
And I feel
mooching
like
off
there's
of
like
somebody
other
for
shows.
their account, but whoever's account that I have, they are paying you a lot of money, HBO.
He said, we are paying you a lot of money. Like they can afford the film House of the Dragon because of our $14.99 a month.
Yeah,
Big
it's a
time
shame.
investors.
And but it makes sense though, because once I read that, it everything that we talked about, like it just seems like this is an episode 8 of a 10 episode season. And I mean, we can talk later about predictions, but like to me, it seems pretty obvious about like it ended with that scene of Alicent and Rhaenyra talking about I'll open the gates for you, and it's just an easy, you walk right in. Like I would guess that the season was supposed to end with Rhaenyra going to King's Landing and seeing what happens there with like entering there and maybe getting on the Iron Throne or something. Like I would think that would probably be the climax to the season of what they meant it to be. And now that would be an early episode of season 3, which I don't know if that makes much sense, but that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is I'm like, so are they just spilling episodes over? Like, how is it cost effective? It's like, oh, we're just gonna save those 2 episodes and make those the first 2 episodes of
Well, you
the
know how
next.
any company, it's like, hey, we're a little over budget this year. We'll just put it on next year's budget. And then we'll have the same problem next year.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
okay, well, I have a question for you. And what we're gonna do from here on, before we get into the awards, is kind of talk about a lot of the differences between House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. But before we get into that, who is your Kelsey? I want to start with you. Who's your favorite character in the show in House of the Dragon? And not just this season, just House of the Dragon as a whole.
House of the Dragon as a whole. Well, I mean, it's hard because like I feel like there were so many differences in a lot of the characters between season 1 and season 2. Like for example, we talked a lot about like how Daddy Damon would have absolutely been number 1 for me in season like was absolutely number 1 for me in season 1. And season 2 is just kind of like, oh, like his storyline, was very lackluster, very repetitive. Um and just didn't, in my opinion, didn't add a lot to the story. So I mean, obviously the dragons, I love them because they're just like awesome. But this season, I gotta go with Rhaenys. Like she was such a badass. Like she was absolutely amazing. All of her scenes not only were extremely strong and like she was absolutely there for a purpose, but I feel like she really was like a driver of like storylines, especially when it comes to Rhaenyra and like how like she was like so lost and had all these like things. So for me it would be Rhaenys, and then I really loved, even though he was only in the season for how many, 2 episodes, 3 episodes maybe? I thought Otto Hightower, like, absolutely killed it, like, from a PR perspective, I was like, "He's incredible." He's, like, absolutely doing his job as Hand of the King, so I would go with Rhaenys and Otto Hightower for this season.
Okay, Rhaenys Otto Hightower, Kate, and it doesn't have to be just a season, just like as a whole in this show in House of the Dragon. Like, who's your favorite character?
I mean, I know we had some issues with her this season, but it's got to be Rhaenyra. Like, I loved her last season. I thought she was great as a seeing her as a kid and like growing up and just seeing her whole story. And she seems just like a good person, which is kind of hard to find. I feel like in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. So, and she's the one true queen. So I love her.
So my follow-up there is that we brought up 3 names now. If any of them in the next episode you watch, first episode of season 3 now, if those characters you mentioned, Rhaenyra, Daemon, Otto Hightower, like if these characters died in the next episode, like how upset would you be about it?
I'd be super upset if Rhaenyra died.
But like to me, with Rhaenyra is obviously the main character, similar to how in season 1 of Game of Thrones, Ned Stark was the main character, and we were shocked and upset when Ned Stark died. But I think if Rhaenyra, for me, I'll just speak for myself, if Rhaenyra got killed in episode 1 of season 3, I would be excited. Like I'd be sad, I guess, because she's the main character, but I would be excited that the show is like taking risks, like that it shows that like big shit is happening in the show, which reminds me of Game of Thrones, and I would like that overall for the storytelling of the show. Whereas like remember how many characters, like people on Twitter throughout the seasons of Game of Thrones would be like, if Jon gets killed, we're rioting. Like if this person gets killed, we're never watching this shit again. Like
Yeah.
There is none of that passion for this, and I think there's a lot of reasons for it which we could get into, but yeah, I don't know, I was just wondering about that, but in general,
because we went from a show that had like 10 people like that, like you would have been heartbroken if the Hound died. You know what I mean? Like that would have messed with you. You'd be like, damn it, he's like not even one of the top 10 main characters on that show, maybe. And like me, I don't have that connection with a single character on the show is like kind of wild.
I agree.
So I want to talk about the differences. I agree with you totally. The differences in Game of Thrones when it comes from the source material, obviously, both come from books written by George R.R. Martin, Brad's boy. The Game of Thrones series was from a series called A Song of Ice and Fire, of which 5 of the 7 books are complete, and that's why we are on this podcast. We give a lot of shit to George R. R. Martin. Well, I do at least. Brad defends him to the death, because that dude just will take any project, will do anything, be as lazy as he can to not finish writing his own books, and it really pisses me off. This one is from House of the Dragon, is based on the book called Fire and Blood, also by George R. R. Martin. But the differences here, and we'll talk about season 1, for example. In Game of Thrones, season 1 was based on season 1, or on book 1 of that series, titled A Game of Thrones. In that book, it is 674 pages of source material, which they translated to 10 episodes. And it went straight from the beginning to the end. It was the same story arcs, same all those things, little changes here and there. But for the most part, like that source material guided the entirety of season 1. In addition to that, in those books, the Song of Ice and Fire books, they're all written, every chapter is from the perspective, the POV of the central characters. So the title of every chapter will be like Jon, and then that whole chapter will be written from his perspective. You know, you're inside his head, you know what he's thinking, all the things. Same with all the other central characters. In House of the Dragon, season 1 was 10 episodes as well. And in contrast, there were 77 pages of source material for 10 episodes. Again, in Game of Thrones, 674 pages for 10 episodes. This one's 77 pages for the same 10 episodes. And the thing is different because each chapter is not written by the central characters. It's a story told by an archmaester who lived years and years and years after all of these things happened. So he's like accumulating stories and putting it into this book. He has multiple sources. These sources are other maesters, or it's one of them is a court fool that they call Mushroom, who just like, and constantly this archmaester in the book, he mentions that these sources, they're not objective. Some of them are pro Rhaenyra, some of them are anti Rhaenyra, and they're not reliable. A lot of them conflict, these stories that we get. So we don't know exactly what is true and what's really happening based on the source material in this book. Some examples of this. So Harwin Strong in season 1, that's Rhaenyra's boo. We see in the show that Larys has people set the fire, kills his own dad and his brother Harwin, and we know Larys is behind it. In the book, we know Harwin dies in a fire in Harrenhal, same thing, but they have no idea who said it. They never talk about the fact that Larys did it. It may be someone, there's rumors here and there, but like no one says it. Whereas like we see that straight up in the show. Same thing with Daemon's first wife. We see him basically like scare her off the horse, then he comes back and kills her. They just mention that she dies, and like maybe one person says like, oh, well, Daemon was always an asshole to her, but they never straight up say that Daemon killed his wife. Also, Laenor Valerion. In the books, they say he's killed by his boyfriend Carl with a Q. But in this, we see there's a whole thing with the whole plan to let them escape and have love together across the narrow sea and whatever. Like that is never a thing in the books. So a lot of these scenes happen, the Rhaenyra and Alicent scenes, like if the maesters aren't there, if they don't have witnesses there, like they don't know what happened, so it's just not in the book. The reason I say all of this is because the showrunners, the writers, they don't have source material to really draw from to plot out and to pace all of these seasons, and they're coming up with a lot of these things based on the guidance of that, but they're coming up with it on their own. And so I'm curious to know your thoughts on, like, you know, what did the showrunners get right in this season? Like, what did they get wrong? Like, what did you like from this? That because they have to be much more creative. Like, they can't just take the pages and translate it to now on film. Like, they have to make the decisions to do things, to show things or not show things.
Is there a reason that they were only pulling from 77 pages when there's a whole book? I know that there's going to be like now 4 seasons, but
so yeah, so that's only for season 1 that I'm talking about. But the book is the book is the whole history of the Targaryens, of which the dance. Yeah, so the book is not about the Dance of the Dragons, which this is about. The book is about the entire Targaryen history. So of that, it's like a few hundred pages that are on this, but that's going to cover 4 seasons, a few hundred pages. So only season 1 was only 77 pages of it, much of which had to do with the succession of Viserys and Viserys's reign itself.
Okay,
so anyway, going back to that though, like, what do you think, like, what did you like about the way that the showrunners, the writers and all that handled this season specifically?
You messed me up by changing it, because like I know when we went through the notes, it was what did you like? So I was like, I mean, I really just wasn't a fan of the season for like a lot of reasons, but the things I was leaning back on was the dragons look great. The FX were really cool, but I don't know how much of that really has to do with the showrunners. Like anything I was thinking of that was a positive, and the things I don't like, I don't know if you would attribute a lot of the positives to the showrunners, just because most of my problems were things like pacing and there not being a payoff. So
we'll get there in a second.
Yeah, I know. Now I don't know what I could say that the showrunners did that I'm like, oh man, they really knocked that out of the park by, like Game of Thrones. I can go back to like knowing the books and knowing the show and saying like, oh, I really thought it was cool that Arya was with Tywin. I thought that was like a really cool part of the show that the showrunners got that wasn't in the books.
Yes.
I really thought it was cool that the books are limited to POV chapters. The show wasn't limited to that, so you got to see things that you couldn't see in the books because no one is around to witness that, so they don't have a POV chapter, so oh well. And like, yeah, I can't think of a single thing for House of the Dragon that I could be like, well, I really like that they kind of needed to drag this storyline out, but I think they executed that well.
Yeah, I mean, in the books, they talk about how Daemon goes to Harrenhal and he assembles an army. But that's basically what they say about him.
The paragraph.
But like, honestly, like that's
Yeah,
I haven't read the book. This is just like, and honestly, I will be reading this book before we go into season 3. We have 2 years, so I will be reading the books. But yeah, like they basically say he goes there, and yet the showrunners chose to make that the storyline of Daemon for the entire season. We all have been very clear with our thoughts on the Daemon storyline specifically, but those are the kind of things I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I mean,
I had a couple.
Sorry. Go ahead, Kate.
I was going to say, I had a couple things written down for what they got right. I thought the battle at Rook's Rest was really good. It had me on the edge of my seat. I thought it was just cool that was like the first time that we see like dragons fight, really. So, I think that was the best part of the season for sure. And then this isn't attributed to the showrunners, but just the acting. I mean, it was top tier for Game of Thrones. It's top tier for House of the Dragon. Like everyone just has their total A game. Like they're all fantastic. And then also just like the shift of momentum. Like when we start out the season, it just seems like the Greens have everything. Like, and we're kind of like, how are the Blacks going to come back from this? And I just really didn't know how that was going to happen. So the fact that we're ending the season now being like, oh, Team Black, like we have 7 dragons now, like green has nothing. So I thought that was cool that we see this like shift of momentum throughout the season and can go into the next season being like, hell yeah, let's go.
You have
That's a
anything?
great point, Kate.
Yeah.
And I think what I really enjoyed this season, and we can obviously get into like some of the other things that we didn't really enjoy like more, but like what I did really enjoy was like the utilization of like small folk and like seeing that beyond war and like, you know, beyond like the actual battles, that there is so much else at play when it comes to like utilizing like, you know, just normal people, and almost like the propaganda behind all of this, you know, because as you're saying, like this is being told behind, like, you know, from a perspective of people that weren't there. It's like from historians, like, you know what I mean? It's like, how much can you really piece together when you like find like fragments of a scroll or like, you know, the Rosetta Stone that you can't like fully be able to, oh, sorry, this cat is being crazy, that you can't like fully transcribe. So I did really like that because I mean, that's like real life. Like we see that in every part of history. So I really enjoyed that. And I agree, Kate. I didn't even think about like the momentum shift being really well done because at the beginning we're like, okay, they got Vagar, so we're fucked. So I did really enjoy that.
Yeah, Kate, you made me think of something too. I think that is a really good point. And for me, it's not necessarily the momentum shift. It was that in the beginning, when we were talking about the marketing leading up to episode 1 and to the start of the season, it was like everyone must choose a side. Is it Team Black or Team Green? And all of us are like, that's pretty fucking stupid because who is Team Green? Like everyone is Team Black. Like no one is rooting for Team Green. And I think that at least in the early episodes, like they made Aegon much more interesting and much more likable. Like they really focused on the greens, and I think that for the majority of the season until the end, like the Team Blacks were just like either not doing anything or they were boring, or I just like didn't even really care. Like Rhaenyra is just sitting there at small council meetings. Like I was far more invested into all the things happening in King's Landing with Aemond and Aegon and all the things happening there, and Helena with her dreams, and Allison getting shit on, and like her relationship with Kristen, like just all those things. I thought like the Greens really carried the show for the most part this season, whereas like I didn't care about them at all leading up to. So you're right. I think that's a good point. I agreed with Brad too. I said that the CGI was amazing. The locations that they filmed that was amazing. The dragons looked incredible. I said the music was a big positive also, the way that they tied it into little things from like Game of Thrones 2 between like the Stark theme, like whenever that happened, and the themes from the different houses, the Reigns of Castamere, all that good stuff. And then changing the opening credits to the tapestry, I also thought that was really cool. I think that's much better of an open than what we got in season 1. So I think they did a really nice job with that too. But I know that we don't have a little bit to talk about for things we didn't like or things that they got wrong. We have got a lot to discuss here. So Brad, I want you to break this open for us. What do you think the showrunners got wrong this season? And before I started, sorry, again, the caveat, we already talked about it, but the fact that they had to cut 2 episodes off of their season that was planned for probably years, that was already written, and then couldn't rewrite because the writer strike was going on, like that's not their fault. So I want to make sure I put it out there. It is not their fault, but the product that we got was 8 episodes, so we got to discuss that. What, Brad, did they get wrong in how they handled those 8 episodes?
I mean, there's a lot, but I honestly, my biggest thing was just like lack of payoffs. Like, I really think like maybe I'll go back and rewatch it and with retrospect be like, oh, there was a reason. But like, just off the top of my head, like Damon, like I feel like a lot of his visions, he spent the whole season there, had all these little random visions, but all it really took was the one vision at the end when he got Daenerys that made him be like, oh, wow. So I'm like, so then what have we been doing all season? Like, it's not like, oh, all of these little things added up and he saw the importance of we all play a small part in this. Like that, I don't know if that had a lot to do with him, like rectifying his relationship with his brother. Like that stuff was cool, like maybe for like character development. But I feel like all these little things that went on during the season were supposed to have this big payoff come the end, and it just like didn't to me.
Yeah, and I agree, Brad. Like there's like a lot of things that you're just like, why? Like you know what I mean? And it was like, okay. Or for me, it's really interesting that they had to cut so much. Cause I mean, two episodes in a 10 episode arc is a fifth of the season. Like that's crazy. That's a lot. But also, in my opinion, to your point, Brad, I feel like there was a lot of like fluff or a lot of things that was like, what are we doing here? And maybe, you know, it will pay off in the beginning of season 3, but it's hard not to be frustrated with that here because if we are doing comparisons between Game of Thrones and like and House of the Dragon, it's like all these things are happening simultaneously in like a much bigger universe, a lot more characters and things like, and even like the smallest details really made a big difference. And I don't see that here. And so it's really hard not to be really frustrated with this. So mm, yeah, I don't know. And some of the writing I thought was like a little like corny to me this season, but
Yeah, there were some hokey moments for
yeah.
sure. Like that we didn't really get until way later in Game of Thrones. Like Game of Thrones started doing that a little bit maybe towards the end.
There
But
was
like
some really egregious. I don't want to forget about how bad some of it was in Game of Thrones too. So just
yeah, we definitely like reached it. But I feel like with this, with it being so much shorter and like there not being as much time, I feel like it was even like way more unnecessary.
yeah, I mean, Kelsey, what you're saying is my number one. I have a number of things that I think they got wrong, but the pacing was the worst part for me. Specifically, the things that they chose to spend time on and the things that they chose to not. And the example that I'll give is like we didn't that whole battle in early on, which was the Brackens versus the Blackwoods, the battle of the Burning Mill, right? Like I think it was effective. And at the time, I didn't mind that they didn't show this battle because there's not any main characters in it. We get it. A lot of small folk died, and it's part of like the bigger story of how this is affecting all the people that are not the nobility of Westeros. But like something that still would have been cool and a point of action, which there was not much of this season other than one episode. Like the fact that we don't see that and we just see so many scenes in the small council meeting of all of Rhaenyra's small council members undermining her, and it's like we get it. Like these people are just the worst. Same thing on the green side. We waste all this time like in the finale with the mud wrestling and all that bullshit. It's like there could have been much like you could have devoted this time to things that would have been much more impactful, enjoyable, better for the story, and they chose not to. The Daemon Visions is another one, just like you said. So it's the pacing of the season as a whole, but also the things that they chose to focus on compared to what they let us, that happened off screen.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's maybe something that we have to go back and like rewatch both before we just like say it. But it seems like I'm saying this off, top of my head without like, going back and rewatching Game of Thrones. But it seemed like there wouldn't really be a lot of scenes in Game of Thrones you could just remove and it not have an impact
Mhm.
of like, hey, what the hell just happened? Like, how'd this character jump from here to there? Versus like House of the Dragon, it seems like there are a lot, like you just said, all the small council meetings with Rhaenyra. Like, I bet you could remove one or two of those, show that same show to somebody without those one or two scenes, and they wouldn't be like, wait, what happened?
Yeah.
Like, how'd we get here? Like, it's the same thing.
The biggest thing that is the difference between the way this is told in Game of Thrones to me, which makes it much harder to tell this story, is that Game of Thrones, especially the early seasons, but really all the way through, it had a lot of different storylines happening at the same time. And so, like, you had John was north of the wall. What he was doing early on had nothing to do with anything happening in King's Landing. Daenerys is over there with the Dothraki or in Karth or whatever, like, had nothing to do with all the other things going on. And so, even if you didn't like, I was bored with Arya training for so long with the Faceless Men, like, it didn't ruin everything because that was a small part and there were so many other storylines that were so great and then you could focus on, and it's no problem. In this show there's really only one storyline and everything is related to this one storyline, which is the Greens versus the Blacks and the battle for the throne and who's the rightful heir and that kind of stuff. So when one part is bad, like Damon's storyline, for example, that's not just so like some isolated storyline over here that like, oh, we don't need to focus on that because we can focus on all this. It all is tied in together. So it drags everything down with it, in my opinion.
And that's such a good point, Noah, because like I just thought of this when you said that. I don't know, like you could debatably ask 100 different people, what's Game of Thrones about? What is the big overlying battle? And you might get different. You would maybe get some people say the battle for the throne. You would get some people say like the battle versus the White Walkers. But with this, it's so obvious. Like like
There's
that.
one thing.
Yeah, and like if you're not really in like yeah, everything's building towards that one thing, minus Game of Thrones. There were all these different arcs, and you didn't know who the main character of that show ever was. So yeah, I mean it really is like night and day in a lot of ways.
Well, and to I mean, to your point, Noah, like even if it's like you didn't enjoy one of the storylines in House of the Dragon, it or in Game of Thrones, it still was moving forward. And it was like every storyline was still like continuous, like you know what I mean? And it was like maybe sometimes you would see how things like interact or whatever, or like it would have a payoff like a couple seasons later, and it's like, oh shit, like that's awesome. But like no matter what, like everything was still moving, you know? And so that's like the biggest thing for here. It's like when you don't have that, like to your point, I mean, it all goes back to like the source material, when you don't have that much, or when they're just kind of like grasping at straws of like, well, what should we do here? What should we do with this character? It's really hard to like as like an audience member be like on board with that. And two, what I have a real big problem with too, and this was also like a complaint of mine for Game of Thrones, like the last two seasons, was it's so confusing when it's like it feels like it's been like months or even years sometimes, like in the storyline, because people are going from like Dragonstone back to like King's Landing, back to Dragonstone, back to this other place. And then they'll be like, yeah, last week my husband died. And it's like, what? Like, how is that even possible when when you're like marching armies and you're like going on a ship and like all these things? So that's like also another thing that I'm having trouble with too, because all these places are really far apart from each other. And like in, and obviously too, I know that they don't have like the same like birth that Game of Thrones does, but it's like hard to suspend like my understanding of like travel back then, and I mean, unless you're on a dragon, now maybe you could get there in like a day or two, but even then it's like it doesn't seem feasible. I don't know.
I
It's
will
very
say, going back to something they got right though, like I agree with you, I understand that, but I think that was a much bigger problem in Game of Thrones, the later seasons, than it is in this, because at least
Mhm.
they're like consistent in this show, where like
Yeah.
like you're right, time travel, not time travel, but time and travel doesn't make sense, but at least they know that, and like they stay consistent with that in this show. Whereas Game of Thrones, like it will take a whole season for them to go from one place to another, and
Mhm.
then in one episode they go from here to there to another place and back in one episode. So like the inconsistency is what really fucked with me of the later seasons of Game of Thrones more than it does in this show.
Okay.
And just think about how everything in Game of Thrones was so earned, even when it didn't. Like when Theon was Ramsay Bolton's like prisoner, that
Mhm.
really at the time didn't really tie into the major story. You're like, okay, Ramsay's trying to like prove himself to his dad, kind of thing. Like, but then think of how like that ended up tying in the Jon Snow storyline. But because they laid those tracks, we hated Ramsay Bolton and couldn't wait for Jon Snow to kill. It seems like this show wants those payoffs of yeah, but like they haven't spent enough time like earning our like emotions and stuff where those payoffs are really going to be the same. It seems like they just want to have that payoff of, oh my god, I can't believe that character that when we're like, yeah, I really didn't like care either way.
Yeah.
That's actually a good point, Brad. Sorry to interrupt, but like, I mean, perfect example is like Hugh and Ulf. You know what I mean? Like, we already predicted, like, yeah, something's going to happen with them because they keep on focusing on these characters. And it's like once they like got the dragon, it was like, okay, or even like, with like Ulf, you're like, why? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you still are kind of like, I don't actually really like that. Whereas, like, in Game of Thrones, like, when there was like story arcs like that, where you're like, you truly see like so many of these little things that like tie in, and like it's not just for like convenience, which it feels like in House of the Dragon.
Yes.
I would have, I think it would have been better. And like, this is just super nitpicky, but like, I really liked Alan and Adam of Hull, but like, people are making fun of it online, which is true. It's like over 8 episodes, every scene is just like them at the docks, like just working on the ship. Corlys maybe comes in, they're Like they put every screenshot of like Alan and all of these things, and just like him standing in front of the ship, still standing in front of him, like still sitting there on this dock, like doing like if they would have taken one scene of Hugh away, one scene of Ulf away, one scene of Alan away, and gave it to like a fourth commoner, and like having that guy died in like trying to get the dragons, it would have made it better for me because it's not like again, when they were trying to claim the dragons, it was just like very like, okay, we see a whole bunch of people. We know two of these people. We know there's two dragons. Obviously, it's going to be those two. So when they claimed it, like it was still cool, visually amazing, but it like it wasn't, there was no suspense there for me. And so like if we saw one of them, like there's three of them now, like what's going to happen? We spent time this season showing us the common folk, showing us maybe their story, which is different than the other ones, and then that one died, like maybe it would have brought a little bit more to it. I don't know, nitpicky,
I saw a
but
thing on Twitter that said we spent all season watching Corliss build this damn boat just to get our final shot of him rowing a canoe.
I saw that.
That is like the epitome of this season. Like the whole season was him rebuilding his ship, and it's gonna be better than ever. And the last shot you get, you see him in the season. This is like rowing his canoe, and I'm just like, that is so season 2 of House of the Dragon.
which sucks because I guarantee you, episode 9 of this season, which we're not getting, but it would have been that big battle at sea with the triarchy and all that shit. So like, it shouldn't have been like that, and it's not their fault. But you're right, and it is funny.
And I mean, like, how much you give them like, there's stuff we don't know, and I swear, like, I'll always still defend Game of Thrones, and they'll be like, I don't know. You just we don't know. Like, you know, D&D got all that shit because they wanted to end the show early and blah blah blah. But for all we know, like maybe Amelia Clark had, you know, said behind the scenes, like, guys, I'm kind of exhausted. I don't know if I have another season of this show in me. Like, I'm just saying things like that happen. It's tough to bring back a cast every year. If you have one of those actors that was like, I don't know if I'm gonna come back again, like, do they throw that actor under the bus and be like, well, we got to end up the show earlier because Amelia Clark doesn't want to do it anymore? Like, that's not a good look for them. Like, I think a lot of things go on behind the scenes that we don't know and that people fall on the sword for. And I don't know if that's the case with this season, but it really seemed like filming locations, like that they were limited. Like, I will swear forever that like Matt Smith had some kind of shooting engagement and was like, I can only do this season if I'm at one location. Like there were just way too many characters who were at the same damn place the whole year. And like, so maybe there were shooting conflicts and that hamstrung them, but that doesn't also mean I don't get to criticize the show and say it wasn't done well.
That is a very optimistic view, and I respect that, and I like it. I do not agree with it at all, but I respect that you have it.
You have an opinion, Brad.
Yes. And we need to recognize your opinion. Your opinion is valid and valuable. I don't agree with that shit, though.
Do you think they did that by choice of how cool would it be to have Matt Smith at Harrenhal all year while we're killing it right now with him seeing and hearing shit that isn't there? We're crushing it right now. Fans are gonna love this.
No, I think they thought that it wouldn't be as big a deal as it was, and they thought that the visions and seeing like young Rhaenyra and all that would be that cool for viewers to see that it would give a pass to everything else happening there. That is what I think.
Yeah, and Brad, like, I mean, going back to the Game of Thrones thing, like, that stuff would have already come out. Like, that would have come out. Like, and now, like, that I've been seeing, like, all these things of, like, over the years where actors are like, well, now that D&D aren't paying me, that's like, I can say what I want or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, I feel like that stuff would have come out from somebody of being like, yeah, Amelia Clark, like, had 10 projects that she was working on, and so we had to cut the shit. Or like D&D would have like come out and probably thrown her under the bus, like, so that
When you
they
saw
would
that
yell that shit.
that video or the pictures of all of them at the table reading the script of the final season together, and every actor is just like, oh my god, like they're all like, shit, this is gonna be fucking terrible.
I like, I get what you're saying, Kelsey, but like at the same time, and I don't know why I'm like thinking this, but yesterday I watched Paul George has like a podcast, and the episode yesterday was the story of what happened when, I don't know if you guys will remember, like Noah will remember it, but like when Latrell Sprewell choked PJ Carlissimo.
Yeah.
This shit happened in 1997. And this, they talked about like the story of how that went down and had people coming out and saying, hey, here's what really happened, here's what that happened in 1997. And it was because I think people are so worried about burning bridges, and like you don't want to throw people under the bus, you worry about, well, maybe I'll end up playing for this. Like, this is something that happened 20 years ago, and no one ever talked. Like, all the players that were there when it happened, no one's, they were like, yeah, we were told you don't speak to the media, you don't talk about this. There are so many examples like that of things that don't come out till way later, when people realize like, okay, what do I care at this point? Like, I'm not playing again in my career. I'm not coaching ever in my career. I'm not worried about like saying the wrong thing that upsets someone or how that like affects my image.
Interesting.
Thanks, Kelsey.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I think it's better time than any. I've got my House of the Dragon wine right here. And I think it's better time than any to get into our season-long awards. So just like every episode that we do, every episode of the season, we talk MVP, we talk LVP, and we talk the cringiest moment of the episode. We've got a number of other awards for the season as a whole, but let's start with the MVP. And Brad, you just talked about Latrell Sprewell, so
Yeah.
I'll give you the first nod to talk about your MVP of season 2.
That, like I alluded to earlier, like I gotta give it up, like the effects people, and you know, like everything looked good. Like the dragons look great. Like there was a lot of cool you know, when they're chasing you know, the oh my god, why can't I think of his name? Sir Bolcut. Kristen Cole, when they're chasing Kristen Cole into the forest and the dragon's like looming overhead, the shots of like Damon when he first gets to Harrenhal and it's raining, like there were a lot of really, really cool like shots, and the effects people, like as much as, you know, we were talking earlier about like saving costs, in terms of how things looked, you don't see that. Now, granted, you know, make a whole other argument about, well, yeah, they cut 2 episodes. I sure as hell would hope they could put the money into the effects and stuff. But like, never did I feel when watching it like, oh, that's kind of clunky, or yeah, that person doesn't look like they're really riding a dragon right now. And like, and I thought the acting was great too. I think it was like Kelsey mentioned it earlier too. Like, the acting was like, you know, subpar of the season, or like was fantastic. So like, yeah, I know. So, you know, I think all of that stuff minus writing and stuff was great, but I don't have like a single character that really like stole the show or any of those things that used to happen in Game of Thrones all the time.
Okay. What about you, Kate?
I have two. My first one is Rhaenys, just because she went into battle knowing she was like, you know, had the lower hand, and she died for her cause, but she took out Aegon while she was doing it. And she was just amazing this season. I felt like she had a lot of really great quotes about like,
Yeah,
just putting, you know, bringing dragons into the war and stuff like that. Like, I just thought they were very meaningful quotes, and I wrote down a bunch, and we'll talk about that later. But I just really enjoyed her this season. She just seemed really wise and just like always very level-headed. um Wanted to avoid the war, so just really liked her. And then of course she died fighting for the cause, which RIP. And then my second one, I did Otto, just because after he left, like his first, he was in like the what, first 2 or 3 episodes. After he left, like everything went downhill for the Greens. Like they really could have used him, and I think he would have helped them make a lot better decisions than they did. So that's why I'm saying he's the most valuable player for the green team, and the fact that he's not with them anymore is very obvious.
Mhm. Those are
I agree
great
with that.
picks. Yeah, those are really great picks. So I am taking MVP like very literal, of like the most valuable player. And for me, it's Vagar. Like, so much of this season is based on around, well, they have Vagar. Like, how can we battle that? Like, what, all this stuff. And you see, you know, in the battle when it's just Rhaenys and her dragon, and then obviously, like, you know, Sunfire
Sunfire.
Sunfire comes in, and, you know, all that stuff happens. but Vhagar truly is a force to be reckoned with. Like, she's crazy big, obviously, like, you know, has like such power, not just like when it comes to like the blacks and the greens, but that affects a lot of other decisions too for other people when they're like, how am I? Yeah, okay, you want me to like pledge to Rhaenyra? What happens when Vhagar comes here and like just decimates my town? Which we actually do see that happening, you know, when Aemon throws his little temper tantrum. So for me, she quite literally this season is the most valuable player because like without her, I mean, truly, like the Greens don't have anything. You know, if you take out Vhagar, what's going to happen? Yeah, they have like a big army and stuff, but now with all these other dragons, even if they're smaller, and less experienced, you know, they don't have battle, like, you know, they're not battle tested. It doesn't matter because they have so many dragons. So that's for me. And then, also to, well, actually, no, I'm going to save that for most improved
So
for later.
Kelsey,
But what
are
about
you
you? No.
saying you're saying that Vhagar is to Team Green what Latrell Sprewell was to the 1999 New York Knicks?
No, because
I'm
no,
I'm gonna Vhagar
because
you if you don't.
Vhagar didn't choke out Aemond on the
I
court
said to the Knicks.
in practice. Uh, yeah, I mean, my MVPs, and I had to dig deep to this. This was a harder question than I thought it would be, but I looked at my notes from all the other ones, and I mean, obviously the last episode he has a little bit of a rude awakening, but Aemond is definitely a winner this season. Between just having the best dragon, like you said, I think Vhagar's a really good choice for it. But now he's ruling in his brother's stead. Everyone's scared of him. Like even before that, though, everyone's talking about like, yeah, this dude is like the best warrior and has the best dragon. So he's just gotten a lot of respect this season. Kristen Cole had as a winner again, did not finish very strong, but you know, he would just continue to fail upwards, like get more and more power. Like this dude didn't come from shit, and all of a sudden is the hand of the king, the best knight, you know, for the Greens. Uh, and he's banging Alicent, so props to him for that. And then lastly, I just will put Alicent's storyline. I talked about it last episode, but I am definitely an Alicent fan. And I just think that her storyline, her character arc over the course of the season was just better than every other one. Like compare that to Daemon. Like Daemon was loyal with Rhaenyra, and then he goes to Harrenhal. He's not loyal, and then he ends by being loyal again. Like he finished where he started. Like he had an arc, I guess, but like that's because he went backwards, then back to where he started. Like Allison's entire perspective. I thought the actress Olivia Cook was just she's just so amazing. And the way she portrayed the downfall of this woman, I thought was just really good. So I put that character arc as my MVP there. But LVPs now, Kate, I'm looking at you. Who is I'm sure most of us have the same person here, but who is your LVP of the season?
I actually did Daemira. So combo of the husband wife, Daemon and Rhaenyra. I know I said she was my favorite character, and now I'm saying she's my least valuable player. But and you know we talked about it in all these episodes, but they just did not do anything. I mean, Rhaenyra did a little bit towards the end of the season, but Daemon, I was just so sick of his storyline and him just like dreaming and having visions and drinking and eating poison stuff and just like talking to Alice and weird conversation and like it just didn't make sense. And I know we've talked this to death, so
Yeah,
I don't have to talk about it more, but Rhaenyra too, like she is my favorite character and she is the main character and I just felt like she just didn't do anything. And she should have taken so much action. And we talked about that too, so I don't want to beat it to death, but LVPs.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully though, the only thing Rhaenyra did basically all season, she did two things: sneak into King's Landing to talk to Alicent, which, based on the meeting and the conversation they had in the finale, didn't even need to happen. So that is just thrown out of there. And then she put in the plan to action to bring the dragon seeds and get dragon riders that are the bastards of House Targaryen. Like, but in truth, it was Jace's idea, and it was Massaria that made it all happen. So like she didn't really
true.
do anything. So like for the most part, I agree. She really didn't do shit the entire season.
Yeah, and for somebody that's fighting for the throne, like fight for the throne, like do something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very frustrating. And again, like you said, Kate, like we've talked about this a lot, like in previous episodes, but like, how the fuck are you going to sit there and be like, I deserve to be on the Iron Throne? Like, I deserve to be the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. Like, this is my like birthright, like my father, like blah, blah, blah. And then you can't even she wasn't even standing up to her own people that supposedly support her. Like, it was her character this season was one of the most frustrating for me. And I absolutely agree that she definitely was like an LVP in a lot of different ways because, like, to your guys' point, I think Noah, you said this like in the beginning, like and season one, you're like, yeah, like we're supporting the blacks, like you know what I mean? And then in this one, yeah, we see a lot more perspective from the greens, and you're like, okay, like they're making moves, they're doing all this stuff, like it's very very captivating. And then for her, you're just like, fucking do something, like stop fucking bitching about it and fucking do something. Don't let like that's like letting a little like 5-year-old like bitch slap you and you're just being like, don't do that. Hey, I already told you. Like, no, like your people need to fucking work for you if you and like they need to have respect for you if you're gonna be a ruler. Like it's crazy. And I mean, you can even see the frustration with Jace too, like her own kid. Like it's like, mom, like fucking step up.
Yeah. Who do you got as your LVP, Brad?
Man, there's a lot. But I do want to say, like, to play devil's advocate, like with Rhaenyra, like I get what you guys are saying. She didn't do shit, but like she wanted to. I think that was showing like she was like, like put in a corner and not being allowed to do those things. Now you can make the argument like she should have stepped up and done it or done it sooner, but I think that was like trying to show maybe like she was more in a democracy of everyone's opinion matters rather than trying to be, come in there and be a dictator right away and be like, well, I'm the boss and here's the way we're doing that. Like you could argue maybe she should have got to that point sooner, but I think that was part of her arc this season was like that balance.
I agree with you, Brad, in that like it wasn't a bad move to like not because again, if she would have gone out and done something, gotten killed, then everything is over. But like then that's a failure on the way that they wrote her character because like she just she didn't like we've established already like she is the main character. This is not Game of Thrones where there's 6 main characters and this is just one storyline that maybe is a little bit more boring or not really going a lot of places, but all the other things are going places. Like this is the one storyline and it's the main character of the one storyline. So anytime that character is not doing anything over the course of a full season, like that is a problem.
Yeah, I just, I would need to go back and like again rewatch, but I think they're showing maybe the juxtaposition kind of like a her and Daenerys, where Daenerys was always a little bit more of like my way or the highway, like, and that was it. She wouldn't listen to her advisors and stuff, and I think this is showing a character who maybe leans too much the other way, of like allowing herself to get punked when she shouldn't.
But she wasn't like that in season one. Like I don't know why. I mean, I get that she grew up and she's like more mature now, but she just kind of like that was the whole point of like her and Allison fighting. Like she didn't care about tradition and she didn't care what people were telling her. Dad wanted her to get married. She didn't want to get married, and she just didn't do the stuff that she wanted
Yeah,
to.
she did what she wanted to
She
do.
did what she wanted to.
Yeah, I'm not defending how it was executed. I'm just saying, like, I think there is a point in that being in there. Like, maybe they didn't do it well enough. Maybe it went on too long. Maybe it was a step back from where she was in season one. But I kind of like that idea of, like, there is too much of, like, allowing yourself to, whether you're a president or a ruler anywhere, of allowing your, like, crew to run everything and you really are just like a figurehead like at that point. And I think that's what the show was trying to show. Again, I won't defend like how it was done or if it was done well, but I kind of like that being part of her story.
So this made me think about probably my favorite scene, one of my favorite scenes in all of Game of Thrones, and this my favorite scene probably of Daenerys, but the scene early on, I want to say it's season 3, where she needs the Unsullied army and she goes to whatever city in ASOS and she's making the trade and she's gonna trade a dragon for this big ass army and all of it Jorah and everyone's like, no, you can't do this. Like it would be crazy. Your advantage of dragons, which they're not wrong. But then she's just looking at them and she's like, don't fucking question me in public. Like, do not do that to me. And then she goes on and has that iconic scene where like she makes a trade. Dragons are not slaves. Dracarys fucking kills them. Like it was one of the coolest things ever. And then afterwards, like they're all apologetic. They're like, "Oh damn!" And she just gives them that look, like, "Don't you fucking ever do that to me again." And like it just, damn. Not only is she badass, not only does she know what she wants, she's gonna go for it, but like it adds so much to the depth of the character to have someone do that and then contrasting that to what Rhaenyra did over the course of an entire season, and like you are the one main character. Like, I don't know, and but more, it's like it's not the character's fault, it's not Rhaenyra's fault, but I think that that's a failure on the showrunners, the writers, on the pacing and everything too, because they chose to have her do that. They chose like obviously the source material isn't there, so they could have came up with things for her to do that was not just stand there and do nothing. Like even if it's inconsequential, even if it doesn't like make the difference in the war entirely, like they could have still had things for her to do this season, and they just didn't.
But that hits like the nail on the head to me of like inconsequential is like a great word to use like for both these shows. Like I don't feel anything in Game of Thrones. And again, I can go back and watch and be like, I guess you could take that scene out and it doesn't. But like even what you're talking about of Daenerys way back when she took the Unsullied and was like, I'm not gonna, listen to anyone. She didn't care that like she gave her word. Obviously, we all agree with her, like free the slaves. Like, obviously, like all of us are rooting for that to happen. But it did show, like, hey, just because I give my word to someone, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do what I want to do at the end of the day. I feel like the seeds were planted for her to have made. A lot of people obviously didn't like the turn she made at the end of the show. But to me, I felt like it was earned because, like, she showed enough times that she's going to do whatever she wants to do and doesn't want to be questioned by anyone else. I feel like this show hasn't, and everyone is super inconsistent. Like I was thinking about like Aegon, like might have been my favorite character this season because you see like the little growing curves, but to me he's not a consistent character when you go back to season 1. Like the beginning of the season, he's giving all the small folk everything they want. Oh, you need sheep replaced? Okay, I'll give you the sheep. And that was like kind of a cool moment, like of like, oh, this king, like, like looks out for the commoners. He just wants to be liked. But I'm like, this is the same character at the end of season 1 was going to child fighting rings and like orchestrating for children to fight to the death. Like, how is it the same character? Like, there just weren't a lot of like things that were like consistent.
Brad, did the events of season 2, 8 episodes, make you feel better, worse, or indifferent about the conversations between Massaria and Otto Hightower? And she's like, "All right, I'll do this for you. I'll give you the king, but you have to put an end to the children fighting pits."
Like it just was like lazy to me. Like I think of that like a lot, but I'm like, that was just like, hey, I like her. She doesn't want child. Like, how low is the bar? That like that's what they did to make her like a likable character. Like,
But they
oh
introduced
wow,
the child fighting pits that episode too. Remember
yeah,
that?
and then was like, oh, she's out to stop those child fighting pits that I learned about 5 minutes ago. Yay!
It's
just
not
like,
like, oh, make sure everyone has something to eat or like, like all these things. It's like this one thing. Yeah,
will
let's do that.
stop the fighting pits of the child. I cannot even
Her
fake
fucking
do an
accent,
impression of
dude.
her.
That's an LVP for
You
me.
will stop the fighting pits of the children. It's like Bill Cosby.
Get the fighting pits of pudding pop.
That's better than Brad's impression.
I'm so glad she doesn't have my favorite line of the season that I would have to read as her voice. Thank God.
All right, well, let's move on to the
Hey, I
cringiest.
have an LVP.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Please.
Well, I just have to get it in because you're not gonna like it, Noah. My LVP, again, just speaking from the literal term least valuable player. Well, I agree with you. I think Allison's like character arc like gave a lot of insight and like it really shows like, like, oh, like okay, like you're battling exactly like what you're battling is exactly like what Rhaenyra was, like that's what you did to her, blah blah blah. Alicent had literally no impact on the storyline this season to me. Like she did absolutely nothing. So she's my LVP.
Hmm.
Sorry.
Hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just think that it's more of a failure again on they only had 8 episodes. It wasn't supposed to be that way, so they didn't get the closure on a lot of characters that they were supposed to get, and it is not their fault. I'll say it again. But Alicent's is really the only, we talked about this last episode, like the only storyline or the only character arc that seems complete. Like from where she was at the start to where she was at the end, like it is different. All of that was earned, in my opinion, and so that's why I respect that storyline. Whereas a lot of the other ones, either they're in the same place as they were before, or it just didn't seem finished.
But
And
would
I
you?
agree. And I'm like, so like if you're saying that an MVP for you is like her story arc, then I would agree with that.
Yes, that is what I mean.
Okay.
She as a character was not my MVP.
But yeah.
The character arc was my
Okay.
MVP. Yes.
Yeah, so she's definitely my LVP for like the actual character. So I just had to get that in there. Sorry.
Okay. No, thank you.
No, would you agree that she has no impact on the storyline of the? If you went back and removed literally every Alicent scene, she literally makes no impact on anything whatsoever that ties into the storyline. If you removed her completely, if she didn't exist in season 2, when we get to the end of season 2, what would have gone differently?
Oof.
That's how bad to me like some of this show is with the filler stuff, like Kelsey said, of like we removed 2 episodes. Like Damon now brought an army to yes, it sucked. He was a Heron all year. It was
He did
boring,
something.
whatever. But he has an army to show for it at the end of the year. Alicent kept trying to intervene. No one ever listened to her about anything. And that's her character. We did not need to cut to her that
okay.
many times to
What
show
else? What I'll say is that you're not wrong. What you said is correct, but like there is one storyline, and the storyline is the fight for the throne, right? The fight for the throne. Alicent Hightower is not one that's going to play a major role in that, no matter what she does. She is not the one fighting battles. She is not the biggest schemer. She is not the one that's going to end up sitting there anyway. So she is a support character. But I think that like so it's unfair to say that like because there's a lot of like when there's one storyline only, then the only people that really matter is like Rhaenyra and I guess Aemon, because like really visually it was amazing with Rhaenys, but like if we cut her out entirely, yeah, we wouldn't have gotten that dragon fight. It could have been someone else on a dragon, but like what if we cut if we cut Corlys out from the like, and I love Corlys as a character, I love Corlys. If we cut Corlys out entirely from season 2, would that be different? If we cut Damon out entirely from season, like, and that's my point about this season in general and like some of the failures there. But like, you could say that about a lot of characters, in my opinion.
Yeah, but is that make it not as a great show? Like, like, should that be the case? Like, shouldn't everyone be doing moving the story forward? And like I feel like there was a lot of moments where like an entire season we can't think of a single thing Alicent did. Why is she getting so much screen time? I get it. Like not everyone needs the, you know what I mean? But like you can make the argument of even like a Laris is like influencing stuff and making things happen and
Well, I think she did too. I mean,
another.
look at her scenes with Aemond. Like, if they're building up Aemond now to be like now he's the main villain, I guess. Like a lot of the scenes that she had with him support that and show like his character both on how she failed him as a mother early on and like why he is the way he is between him and the brothel scenes, and then see him how he reacts to everything that he does. Like a lot of it is because of Alicent, and you see like when he dismisses her from the small council, like I think a lot of that adds to his character more than it is like her making plans for the throne or something like that.
Yeah, it just seems like she's just there a lot of times, and like she's like the middleman that you could easily take out of like when Aemon is trying to get his sister to go fight in the dragon, like she's like, "Stop it, Aemon, what's wrong with you? You let go of your sister." But then 2 scenes later, we get actual Aemon having an actual conversation with his sister, and his sister being the one who's kind of like, "Hey, here's what's gonna happen," and blah blah blah. So why do we even need a scene of Alicent being like, "You knocked that off"? Like it seems she's just there a lot of times and like not really impacting the story at all.
Where do you fall on this, Kate?
I mean, I thought Kelsey initially when you said like she's LVP because she literally didn't do anything, I was like, dang, like you're right. Like I don't think I love her storyline, and I agree with both of you, Noah and Kelsey.
Oh,
She
what a
has
cop
a
out.
great storyline, she has a great character arc, and I really enjoyed it and it interested me. Uh, but she really didn't influence anything this season. And I do think that like you could have removed a lot of the scenes with her and it wouldn't have impacted anything. But that's like we said, like that's a failure of the season as a whole.
Like no one even learns from her. Like you can make the same argument maybe about the Hound in Game of Thrones, but you get like, well, he's teaching Arya valuable lessons about things aren't so black and white, and people you might have grew up hating, like maybe you start to see the world through their perspective a little bit. She literally doesn't influence anybody, teach anyone anything, change anyone around her. She's just there.
I just think that, like, I don't necessarily think you're wrong, but I think that that is not a bad thing. Like, in storytelling, there's a lot of characters like that that provide depth because of their relationships to other characters. Like, I'm trying to think in Game of Thrones now, but like, I guarantee there are full seasons where it's like, even someone important like Tyrion, it's like, what was like, did he really impact the storyline of the Lannisters versus the Starks or whatever it is? Like, he could have, like, he was just fucking around with Braun, like that. He could have been cut out of the whole thing. Like, I just think that that happens in shows, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and it's easy for me to like say that without having the I just rewatched Game of Thrones and you're wrong, Noah. Like, Tyrion did this. Like you very well could be right. Like House of the Dragon is more fresh in my mind because like we just finished it, which is why these things are bothering me. And maybe I'm like holding Game of Thrones up to, on a plateau or where I went back and watched it and was like, oh yeah, I guess you could kind of take Tyrion out. But because these things are fresh in my mind or why these things maybe bug me more.
Yeah. I get it. I don't want to talk about Allison anymore because just yeah, we need to move forward in this podcast. But let's move on to cringiest moment. What did you guys have for this? I have three main ones. Kate,
Mine was just that line I had of Damon with Alice when he's like, "I'm asking for counsel, not help." Like, get out of
God.
here. That's mine.
I need to go back and rewatch that because I don't even know what you're talking about.
I do know what you're talking about, and I did not think it was an issue.
So unearned, so weird, so weird. Like they've got this playful relationship. Like, what are you doing?
Ugh. Kate, what do you got for cringiest?
I had Amond at the brothel and his full frontal
Oh
scene.
yeah. See, I
That
didn't have that,
just
and that's good. Yeah.
that scarred me in my brain. But also like not just even for like the full frontal like nudity. I didn't need to see that from him. But also just because like it was kind of sad. Like it was kind of sad to see like his brother being so mean to him
Yeah.
when he's in like a really vulnerable position. So like that was also kind of cringy to me.
Yeah, I feel that. I should have had that too because that's a really good one. I had just Aegon being so burnt up, and when they're like peeling his armor off of his melted skin, and like, ugh, and the blisters are bursting and it's bloody, and then they set the leg, like that just was really nasty. I was definitely cringing during that moment as well. So, we talked about a lot of the other things, like the little like the Damon scenes I have too, but like it just no, we don't need to do that again. So from bad to good, best scene. What are I got three scenes that really stand out in my mind, but Kate, let's stay with you. What is your favorite scene, or what did you think was the best scene this season?
I also have a couple. So that's kind of good that I have four of them actually.
Nice.
Yeah. So maybe this season wasn't all that bad. So I had the Rhaenys and Meleys battle and
Yeah.
their death. That was really moving. And I mean, just from being online, people were like really upset about her death, and thought that it was like a very good scene, a battle scene, a dying scene. So especially just from like her going into battle and being like, what did she say? Like, let's last battle, old girl, or something like that.
Yeah.
Just from then on, I was like, I was so hooked, and was just so like honed in on her. And I just thought that was like a really great scene. Um, and then I also had in the last episode, episode 8, the Alicent and Rhaenyra meeting. So I know we talked about that on our last episode quite a bit because it was a big scene. But I just love that scene. And how Alicent is just like so defeated and so turned around from where she began the season. And then the acting, I know we already talked about that, was just like incredible in that scene. And then I had the Eric and Arik battle.
Oh,
I know it
forgot
was
about
kind
that.
of a yeah, it was kind of like a smaller moment of the season, but just like really sad how the one had to kill the other one, and then the other one, I don't even know who killed who, but they killed one another, and then the other guy was like, I just can't go on, like knowing that I've killed my brother. So I thought that was really impactful and well done, even though it was kind of like a smaller moment. And then just that scene with Aemon flying to Dragonstone and seeing Rhaenyra with the 3 dragons. I know we talked about like that could have been like the end right there because I thought that scene was awesome. And I guarantee you everybody watching was just like,
Yeah.
and that's what
Yeah. That's all of those are really good. Brad, what do you think? Best
I,
scene.
the battle at the end of episode 4, just like, obviously we remember like the big stuff, like, Rhaenys dying and stuff like that, but getting that moment, like, to me, that it was just so obviously well done. But like even like the little things, like when Aegon, crashes and Aemon's kind of like walking up and Kristen Cole kind of sees him, that led to us having like interesting debate of like, yo, was he trying to like kill him right there?
Yeah.
Did he try to do that intentionally when they were in the air? Like, it got us like asking questions in a lot of ways, like a lot of stuff didn't this season. So I would say, and so that along with the fact that it was just so well done, like that to me had to be the highlight of the season, which sucks that it came, halfway through the season.
Yeah. What do you think, Kelsey? What was the best scene or your favorite scene of the season?
Yeah, you guys definitely hit all of those. So like in addition to that, I think the scene where Riverland's boy just eats Damon up
Yeah,
and
I
just
love that.
like absolutely demonstrates like, he's like, I'm gonna be a good leader. Like you mean? So that was good. And I really liked I knew it's not a specific scene, but I really liked any scene with Sir Simon. Like I think maybe he might be one of my that I forgot to say like one of my like favorite characters. So I would just say like yeah, anything with him because it brought like it was like very subtle levity. Like you know what I mean? Like his like looks and like his like who are you talking to? And like he just was like so cute, like a cute little old man. So I would
Yeah,
say
we still have Rookie of the Year coming up, so that's a tease for that one. Um, yeah, Kate, I think you made a great point about the Eric and Arik, and I remember that now. And I think that that was a win in terms of scene because I loved how the director shot it, where like truthfully, it didn't matter which one was which. It did not matter which one won because the point they made of the whole thing was that like the whole thing is fucked. Like the small folk, these people fighting for these people that they don't even know about, they don't care. It's destroying families. Um, and I just liked how they did that, where they kept it up in the air of like which one was which, and it didn't matter who won because both of them lost. I thought that was great. Um, I have the final vision that Damon had, which we talked extensively about in the last episode. We broke down all of the visions and the book things and the Blood Raven and all that. But as a nerd, as a book reader, I was super into that. And then my other one was in from episode 2, which was when Aegon fired Otto as Hand of the King, and Otto just lost his shit and was called his grandson a fool. Aegon was like, "Yeah, we need people that are forward thinking." Like Kristen Cole over here has this great plan with the Eric and Arik thing, remember? And like he's like, this bullshit Parent Trap fucking plan is bullshit. Like, it just that was a great scene to me. I like that one a lot, and yeah, I thought that was my other favorite scene.
Otto killed it in that scene. I loved that.
Yeah, I do think going back to Auto, which we talked about a couple times, I think that was another not failure of the season, but thing that like made the season be what like he is one of the more captivating as a positive and a negative actors and characters in the show, and the fact that he was shelved for basically the whole season two. I think he was gone after episode 2, so he's been gone most of the season. Not having him there really hurt. Plus Aegon too. In the beginning, the first 4 episodes, he really he was like the up and comer. Like we liked him all of a sudden. There was new depth to this character. And then all of a sudden he was burnt to a crisp, and we really didn't get anything from him the whole rest of the season too. So I think all of these are reasons why the season kind of fell very flat. But next category, next award is Rookie of the Season. This is a new character introduced in season 2 that was not in season 1 who made a instant impact. So, Kate, I already know what you're going to... Well, actually, you know what? Kelsey, let's stay with you since you were just kind of talking about some of these.
Well, I don't want to step on anyone's toes.
We all got some of the similar ones, so you're good.
I'll start with Hugh. I loved Hugh. I really liked his character. I liked his story. I thought it made a lot of sense, and the actor was just absolutely phenomenal. I'm actually really excited. I hope he gets other bigger roles because I think he's really great. Obviously Little Riverlands boy and Sir
Lord
Simon.
Oscar Tully.
Lord Oscar Tully, thank you. I forgot, yeah, Bert and Ernie and Oscar and all that. Grover and so yeah, like I thought he was amazing. Really liked his character. Obviously, Sir Simon was a G. And then Kate, I think maybe we might have one of the same ones. The doggy.
That's mine too.
I did put the dog on.
I got
wow,
the dog.
That's a huge miss for me. Wow.
Dang, I thought I was gonna really steal your thunder with that one. So
Nope, but that's excellent. Excellent.
That's me. I got Sir Simon, Lord Oscar Tully, and Cheese's dog. Those are my 3.
I also had Sir Simon Strong and Oscar Tully. So this is like they're cleaning up.
Yeah, for sure. Brad, what you got? Anybody else?
There's Simon, but forgot about that dog.
Yeah, that dog crushed it. He was in like almost every episode too, like the first 4 or 5. Like they're just like inserting him into like the background of random shots just because he was so great. All right, next award, the most improved player, someone that maybe wasn't great in season 1, really redeemed themselves in season 2, or just had a lot of character growth throughout that period. Kate, you mentioned a couple good ones that you have. Who are your most improved players?
So my most improved player, I wasn't sure exactly how to take this award. So my first one is most improved from season 1. So I did Massaria because season 1, I didn't really like her.
It's a good one.
I wasn't really invested in her. And like we kind of already mentioned it about like all of a sudden she was like a children's rights advocate for like no reason. And I found that really, really bizarre. But this season, like she really like stepped up. She's now like basically I know she's not really hand to Rhaenyra, but Rhaenyra really like takes her advice and looks to her for what they should do. She had some amazing ideas to get the small folk in their hands in King's Landing, like sending the food and whispers about like, oh well, they're having parties without you and like all that stuff. So that was all Massaria, and so she kind of killed it this season, and I was like, okay, all right, girl. And then from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, I actually put Alicent, which I know we've already talked about her a lot, but I just thought it was really cool how I hated her so much in the beginning and from season 1. Thought she sucked terribly and just was a terrible mom, and she was banging Kristen Cole, and I'm like, oh god, you're the worst. But now like at the end of the season, she's been through it and she's over it. But she's like it seems like she's on the right path now of like, I don't even care about any of this. I don't want this war to happen. Like, I just want to go live in the woods. So I guess I considered that improved.
Okay, Brad.
I mean, it's piggybacking a little bit on what each of you said. Like, Kate really makes a great point from this area. Like, I mean, she had the biggest like jump of like this character like is annoying, please get rid of this character, to like me not feeling that way. But so Kate saying that makes some good points, but originally I had Aegon as mine. No, you kind of touched on it, like it kind of like ended up really like dropping off as we got, as the season progressed. Like, but in the beginning, I really like, and especially like Tom Glenn Carney is the actor who plays Aegon. And I thought like if not, because I did kind of crap on the character of like not being consistent with who the character was in season one. So I don't know if my award maybe goes to the actor, just because like every time he was on scene was fun. If he was trying to be
Yeah.
funny when his son was, messing with the Lannister and stuff like that, he was funny. When he was trying to be scary and pissed off, it was done well. Everything that he was trying to do was always done well with that character and that actor, which I don't know if that was the case in season one.
And I will also add too for Massaria, like her accent in season one was
So bad.
insane.
So
And
bad.
she fixed it for season two. So that was also very improved.
Yeah, yeah, that was so bad in season one. Who was improved for you, Kelsey?
Yeah, you guys really hit it on the head a lot with like, Massaria and Aegon were my big ones, but I think you can even kind of say Aemond a little bit, you know what I mean? Because like
Oof.
his, character did do so much this season. And even though I hate him like Sir Crispy, I mean, he definitely like his I would almost argue that his like character arc was one of the most like, or not maybe the most interesting, but one of the most compelling this season. So for me, that makes him like an improved player, even though I still hated him.
Hmm. Well, along the same vein, I have a hot take. My most improved player is Laris, Sir Laris, or not Sir, just Laris
That's
Strong.
awesome.
I mean, he just in season one, it was just like, oh, what the fuck? This guy, he was like a pervert, fucking foot fetish. That one came out of nowhere. Like everyone hated this guy. Like you didn't even know what his motivations were. Like I thought they did a very poor job in showing him and showcasing him as a character in season one. Other than like, trying to grasp at power, but like what he was doing just didn't make much sense. And I'm thankfully they abandoned that, and like he's still grasping for power, he's still trying to get close in proximity to the power. But the things that he did in season two just to me makes a lot more sense. And he's, trying to help out Aegon because he's helping himself. So I think it just makes more sense and wasn't as weird as season one. So he would be the most improved. But our last award is our favorite line / our favorite quote. So we're gonna do something fun though. We did this last season too, where all of us will try to do our best impression of the character that said this quote. So I hope you all have it written down because I got a couple of them, and I would like you to take some of these off of my plate. So Kelsey, I just have a high hopes on this one. Why don't you give us your favorite line, please?
The king is my grandson, and my grandson is a fool. He's worse than a fool. He's murdered innocent men. It's really bad, but
That wasn't that bad. That was
I
pretty
loved
good.
it.
That was pretty good.
That was great.
that whole fucking speech by Otto is just fucking top tier. Like
That was
he's
my scene. That was my favorite scene. I'm telling you.
so good. But yeah, that's fine. You're welcome.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Brad, how about you?
There was a line about small folk that I could not find. That was probably my favorite, but the one that I do have is, it's not a prize to be won, but a burden to bear.
That's supposed to be Alice.
That's Massaria for sure.
No,
Alice.
that's Alice.
It's not the prize to be won, but a burden to bear.
I'm trying to think what accent that it could possibly
Irish,
be.
Celtic, Scottish.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
no,
Okay,
that's
go
not
ahead.
what it is. Oh man.
Show us how to do it.
Oh no. I have so many written down here.
Gotta do them all, clearly.
No, I'm not going to. But let me choose one. God. And it's not gonna be like a good imitation for sure.
There'll be some.
Noah, you go first.
Okay, so I have two. So then you can pick two of them. I'll go. It would be me, you. How about that? So both of them are actually from Kristen Cole, both of mine. And one of them I highlighted the last episode where he goes, "Do not think I have no shame in me, sir. My desire for women has brought me grief after grief." That's what another like him, but
Did that one really hit home for you, Noah?
no, he's a real one for that. He's a real one for that. I got another one next, but I'll let you go first, Kate.
All right, I guess I'll do this one just because I hated Kristen Cole so much this season. I gotta see if I can even do an accent. Is there no honor left in this world, Cole? Sacking your queen's own castles and putting her people to the sword? Kingmaker, you are not fit for the white cloak. Lord,
that was fucking good, dude.
That was like I was watching a Shakespeare play.
Yeah, that was really, really good.
Thanks.
All right, I'll go now. It's crazy that both of my quotes are fucking Kristen Cole. Goddamn. But all right. Also from the finale, same scene as the other one. The dragons dance, and men are like dust under their feet, and all of our fine thoughts, all of our endeavors are as nothing. We march now towards our annihilation. To die will be a kind of relief. Damn. That's also real.
These are some solid lines, guys.
No one had the one about the busted sausage?
Oh, damn it. That's
sausage on a spit.
My dick doesn't work anymore.
You going one more, or are you done, Kate?
I'll go ahead and do just one more, even though there was actually a lot of good quotes from this season. So
there were.
Do you think simply wearing the crown imbues you with wisdom? Those men at your council table earned their seats. It was my hope that once enthroned, you would honor the burden of your new duties, be silent, and strive to learn from the more studied minds around you, in the hope that you might be half the king your father was. From Allison.
I thought that was a good scene too.
Solid choices.
Thanks.
Well, all right, let's close this episode out with some predictions for season 3. It's all fucked because some of the things that were supposed to be in season 2 will be in season 3 now, so we could kind of guess that some of the things might be happening. But Kelsey, like, any bold predictions, something we might see in season 3? As we know, the show will go 4 seasons total. So
God, I really don't know. But I will say, like, before we wrap up, I think we really missed an MVP with the Maester. He was a fucking G this season, like, for Team Green. Like, he was involved in so many things and, like, kept his mouth shut about a lot of things. But anyways, so there's that. God, I don't know if I have any predictions for that we haven't, like, already covered, like, that I think is, like, so, like, it's obviously gonna happen, of, like, you know, like, the younger sister, like, getting a drag, or, like, going to get that dragon. Like, you know, Alicent not gonna be able to hold up her end of the bargain because Laris and Aegon are, like, on the run. So that's gonna cause, like, a lot of problems. I think someone called it that Ulf might be, like, a turncoat, or, like, do some crazy shit and, like, cause some problems in season 3. Yeah, I don't think I really have anything that's like, oh my God, like, you know, this is gonna be, like, absolutely crazy.
I feel that. What's your Kate? Anything breaking for predictions for season 2?
Yeah, I feel like none of them are, like, really good predictions, but I also had that Rhaena claims sheep stealer, that wild dragon. I think that's pretty obvious. The battle at sea between all these ships now, like, that's definitely going to happen. I also think that even though Alan had a really good scene with Corlys about how much he, like, hates him and doesn't want to, like, help him out, I still think he's going to be the heir to Driftmark somehow. So maybe they have some sort of reconciliation. And then sadly, I think there's going to be, like, a lot of dragon deaths, and I'm really scared.
Yeah, just the fact that, like, there was really one set piece of action in this entire season leads me to believe that there's going to be a lot of action in season 3. So I just think a lot of people are going to die, like, main characters. I mean, there really was no I mean, other than Rhaenys, was there any main characters that died all season? So I just think that there's going to be a lot of them that end up dying. Maybe it's Corlys. Maybe Corlys gets killed on this battle with the Triarchy or something like that. Or just it would be very funny though, because it just seems so damn obvious that Rhaena is going to claim Sheep Stealer. Like it'd be funny as fuck if Sheep Stealer just roasts her. Or someone else comes out of nowhere and claims her before she does or something, and like all of that, like that would be very fun. I don't think it's gonna happen, but that'd be very funny to me.
All I know is if anything happens to that baby dragon, which obviously it probably will, but it's gonna be devastating.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been very, very fun. I've loved coming back with you after every episode, talking all the things, the nerdy things, the things we saw on the show, what we liked, what we didn't like. It's all been so much fun. So I appreciate you guys for talking it out with me. I appreciate all of you who are listening or watching on YouTube right now and sticking with us, because it's been a lot of fun for me. But anything else that you guys have about season 2 before we really wrap it up?
I don't think so. Just
Don't have
it was
anything,
fun, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Great job hosting, Noah, as always, and being our leader throughout these podcasts. And then, yeah, I mean, we kind of were talking about this before, and this might be a part of your wrap up, but if anyone listening, is going to miss us for the next 2 years before House of the Dragon comes back, let us know what you guys would like us to review, whether it's a movie, whether it's a show, or like a trailer or a specific storyline or something that has something to do with like pop culture, comic books, superheroes, sci-fi, things like that. Let us know, because we are definitely looking for content and we want to keep consistent with this. And yeah, just to reiterate, like, thank you all for your support and for listening to our
Truth. We're a bunch of nerds, but we are a group of friends as well. So there's a lot of things that we all watch and talk about that we don't necessarily do it on the podcast. So if there's something that you'd be interested in hearing us recap, talk about, let us know what it is, because we're down and we love doing all this. And obviously, like I said, make sure to subscribe and make sure to like and be notified of all the content that we're doing, because it really, really helps us. So we appreciate you so much. But that's going to do it for this coverage, our coverage on season 2 of House of the Dragon. As a reminder, we said it before, but we have episodes on all 18 episodes so far on the series, as well as things like season 1 of Rings of Power will probably be coming back for season 2 once that comes out as well. But thank you so much again, and we will see y'all next time. Appreciate you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Geek and You Shall Find podcast, powered by Superhero Faces. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Superhero Faces, and on Instagram at Superhero_Faces.